What happens when a beloved music icon is ambushed on live television by a host who refuses to show even a shred of respect? In just 39 seconds, one cruel comment turned an interview into a full, blown on-air meltdown that would leave the entire panel speechless and force producers to cut to commercial. This is the story of how Petula Clark, one of Britain's most treasured performers, walked off the Loose Women set after Denise Welch crossed a line no guest should ever have to tolerate. It was supposed to be a celebration of a legendary career. Instead, it became a masterclass in how not to treat a guest and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. The segment started like any other afternoon on the popular talk show. The studio lights were bright, the audience was ready, and the panel of 4 hosts sat behind the curved desk with their notes and coffee mugs. Denise Welch, known for her outspoken style and sometimes controversial opinions, was seated at the center alongside panelists Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore. The energy in the room felt electric, but not in the way anyone had hoped. The makeup team had just finished their final touches, the floor manager was counting down, the cameras were rolling, everything seemed perfect, at least on the surface, but beneath that polished exterior, something was about to go terribly wrong. Petula Clark walked onto the set to warm applause. She smiled graciously, waved to the audience, and took her seat on the guest sofa. At 82 years old, the legendary singer still carried herself with elegance and poise. Her career had spanned decades from her break, through hit Downtown in the 1960s to her acclaimed stage performances in recent years. She was there to talk about her latest project, a new album that celebrated her lifelong love of jazz standards. She had been looking forward to this interview. She had been a fan of the show for years and thought it would be a lovely opportunity to connect with a daytime audience, share some stories from her career, and talk about the music she loved. She had no idea what was about to unfold. Denise wasted no time jumping into the interview. She leaned forward with a grin that looked more like a smirk and said, "Petula, welcome to the show. Now I have to ask, you've been in this business for what, 60 years, 70 years? How does it feel to still be out there when most people your age are well enjoying retirement?" The studio went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. The audience members looked at each other with confused expressions, unsure if they had heard correctly. Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her smile frozen on her face. Nadia Sawalha glanced at Denise with a look that said, "Did you really just say that?" Jane Moore stared down at her notes, clearly wishing she could disappear. The camera operators exchanged worried glances. Even the crew members standing off to the side looked uncomfortable. But Petula, ever the professional, kept her composure. She had dealt with difficult interviewers before. She had faced tough questions and awkward moments throughout her long career. She knew how to handle herself. She smiled politely and replied, "Well, Denise, I have never thought of what I do as work. Music has always been my passion. Retirement has never crossed my mind because I love what I do. Every time I step on stage or into a recording studio, it feels like coming home." Denise laughed, but it was not a warm laugh. It was sharp and dismissive, the kind of laugh that makes you feel small, like you just said something foolish. She tilted her head slightly, that condescending gesture people make when they think they know better than you. She said, "Right, but there must come a time when you think, maybe I should hang up the microphone and let the younger generation have their turn. I mean, how many more albums can you really put out at this point? Don't get me wrong, you had a great run. Downtown was a massive hit, but that was 60 years ago. Times have changed, people have moved on." Petula's smile faltered for just a moment. Her eyes flickered with something that looked like hurt, but she quickly regained control. She was a professional through and through. She had learned long ago not to let people see when their words landed. She took a breath, composing herself, and said, "I think there is always room for artists of all ages. Music is not something that has an expiration date. If anything, I think experience and maturity bring a depth to music that youth cannot always provide. I am not trying to compete with younger artists. I am simply sharing the music I love with people who want to hear it. And judging by the reception my recent concerts have received, there are still plenty of people who appreciate what I have to offer." Kay Adams jumped in, trying to steer the conversation in a more positive direction. She said, Petula, I think what makes your new album so special is that you are bringing these classic jazz standards to a new audience. Can you tell us a bit about how you chose the songs? Petula looked grateful for the lifeline. She began to talk about the album, explaining how she had always loved Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, and how she wanted to honor their legacy while adding her own interpretation. She spoke with warmth and enthusiasm, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the interview might get back on track. But Denise was not done. She had that look in her eyes, the one that said she was enjoying this, that she thought she was being clever or provocative. She leaned forward, cutting Petula off completely and interrupting her mid-sentence. Her tone was dripping with skepticism. She said, "Okay, but let's be honest here. Let's really be honest. Do people really want to hear you sing these songs? I mean, we have younger artists doing jazz now, people who are fresh and exciting, people who are relevant to today's audience. Why should anyone listen to someone who has been around since, the 1950s? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just asking the question that I think a lot of people are wondering." The room went silent again. This time the tension was palpable. You could feel it pressing down on everyone in the studio. Nadia Sawalha put her hand to her forehead, shaking her head in disbelief. Her mouth was slightly open, like she could not believe what she was hearing. Jane Moore muttered something under her breath that the microphones barely picked up, but it sounded like a curse word. Kay Adams looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk and disappear forever. Her face had gone pale. The audience was no longer smiling. Some people were gasping. Others were shaking their heads. A few were even starting to boo quietly, and Petula, who had been so poised and gracious up until that moment, visibly stiffened. Her shoulders tensed, her jaw clenched, her hands, which had been resting gently in her lap, curled into fists. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. She said quietly, her voice steady but with an edge that had not been there before, "Denise, I am not sure what you are trying to accomplish here. I came on this show in good faith. I thought we were going to have a conversation about my music, about my career, about the album I am so proud of. I thought this was going to be a pleasant chat, but instead you have spent the last several minutes questioning my relevance, my talent, and my right to even be making music. I'm not sure what I have done to deserve this treatment, but I came here to talk about my work, not to be insulted and belittled on live television." Denise leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms defensively. She had that stubborn look on her face, the one that said she was doubling down and refusing to back off. She shrugged, as if this whole thing was being blown out of proportion. She said, "I am not insulting you, Petula. Honestly, I am not. I am just asking the questions that people at home are probably thinking. You cannot expect everyone to pretend like age is not a factor. It is a factor in every industry, and in entertainment especially. Youth matters. Audiences want to see fresh faces and hear new voices. That is just the reality of the business. I am sorry if you find that offensive, but I am just being real with you." Nadia Sawalha finally spoke up. She could not stay silent anymore. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. She looked directly at Denise, her eyes blazing with anger. She said, "Denise, I think you are being incredibly rude and incredibly disrespectful. Petula is a legend. She is an absolute legend. She has more talent and grace in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. She has given us some of the most beautiful music ever recorded. She has performed for presidents and prime ministers. She has sold millions of records all over the world, and you are sitting here treating her like she is some nobody who wandered in off the street. She deserves better than this. She deserves so much better than this." Denise rolled her eyes dramatically and waved her hand dismissively. She said, "Oh, come on, Nadia, I am just being real. Someone has to say what everyone is thinking. We cannot all sit here and blow sunshine up her skirt just because she is famous. This is supposed to be a talk show where we have real conversations, not a fan club meeting." Jane Moore chimed in, her voice firm and unyielding. She had been holding back, but now she could not contain herself anymore. She said, "No one is thinking that, Denise, absolutely no one. You are the only one being disrespectful. You are the only one who thinks that tearing someone down on live television is somehow brave or honest. Petula has every right to make music and share it with the world. Age has nothing to do with talent, nothing. In fact, I would argue that her experience and her years in the industry make her even more valuable, not less. She knows her craft inside and out. She has earned the right to be here, and she certainly has earned the right to be treated with basic human decency. Kay Adams nodded vigorously in agreement. She looked deeply uncomfortable, almost pained by what was happening. She turned to Petula with genuine concern and said, "Petula, I am so sorry. This is not how we intended this interview to go. Not at all. We are all huge fans of yours. I grew up listening to your music. My mother loved you. I have always loved you, and we would love to hear more about your album, about your life, about anything you want to share. Please, can we just start over? Can we forget the last few minutes and have the conversation you came here to have?" But the damage was done. The wound had already been inflicted, and no amount of apologies could take back what had been said. Petula's expression had changed from warm and open to guarded and hurt. The light that had been in her eyes when she first walked onto the set was gone. She looked tired. She looked defeated. But most of all, she looked disappointed. She looked at Denise, then at the other panelists, and finally at the audience. Some people in the crowd were nodding at her encouragingly, silently telling her that they were on her side. She stood up slowly, taking her time, smoothing down her dress with trembling hands. She said, her voice steady but thick with emotion, "I appreciate the kind words from some of you. I really do, but I did not come here to be treated like I am past my prime or irrelevant. I did not come here to be told that I should step aside and make way for younger people. I have spent my entire life working in this industry. I have given everything I have to my music, and I have earned the right to be treated with respect. If that is too much to ask, then I do not belong here." Denise opened her mouth to respond, likely to offer some half-hearted excuse or to double down on her position, but Petula held up a hand, stopping her mid-breath. Her gesture was firm but dignified. She said, her voice gaining strength with every word, "No, Denise, you have said quite enough, more than enough, actually. I think it is abundantly clear that you do not respect me or what I have to offer. You have made that painfully obvious to everyone in this room and everyone watching at home. So, I am going to do what I should have done 5 minutes ago. I am going to do the only thing a person can do when they are being treated this poorly. I am leaving. I am walking out of here with my dignity intact because that is something you cannot take from me." The audience gasped collectively. Some people stood up. Others started applauding, showing their support for Petula. Kay, Nadia, and Jane all started talking at once, their voices overlapping in a desperate attempt to convince Petula to stay. Kay said urgently, "Petula, please do not leave. We want to hear about your music. We genuinely do. Denise does not speak for all of us. She does not speak for this show. Please give us another chance." Nadia added desperately, her voice cracking slightly, "Yes, please stay, Petula. Please, we can talk about your album, about your career, about your favorite jazz singers, about anything you want. We are so honored to have you here. So incredibly honored. You are one of the reasons I fell in love with music in the first place. Please do not let this ruin what should have been a wonderful conversation." Jane looked directly at Denise with fury in her eyes. Her face was flushed red with anger. She said sharply, her voice like ice, "Denise, apologize right now, this instant. You owe Petula an apology. You owe all of us an apology. You have embarrassed yourself. You have embarrassed this panel, and you have embarrassed this entire show. Now apologize." But Denise just shrugged, looking completely unbothered by the chaos she had created. She seemed almost proud of herself. She said defiantly, "I do not have anything to apologize for, not a single thing. I was just being honest. I was asking questions that needed to be asked. If she cannot handle honest questions, then maybe she should not be doing interviews. I stand by everything I said. That was the final straw." The last possible moment for redemption had passed. Petula looked at Denise with an expression that was equal parts disappointment, disbelief, and profound sadness. It was the look of someone who had just realized that some people will never understand the impact of their words. She said, her voice quiet but powerful, carrying across the silent studio, "Honesty without kindness is just cruelty, Denise. It is just cruelty dressed up as bravery, and I will not sit here and be the target of it. I have spent 60 years in this business being honest with people while also treating them with respect and dignity. Apparently, that is a skill you have yet to master, and I will not stick around to be your punching bag." With that, Petula Clark unclipped her microphone with steady hands, refusing to let them see her shake. She handed it to a stunned production assistant who looked like she was about to cry and walked off the set with her head held impossibly high. Every step was measured, every movement was deliberate. She did not rush, she did not storm off, she simply walked away with grace and dignity, the same grace and dignity she had shown throughout her entire career. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, showing their overwhelming support for the music icon. Some people were on their feet. Others were calling out words of encouragement. One woman in the front row shouted, "We love you, Petula." Kay, Nadia, and Jane sat in stunned silence, their faces reflecting shame, embarrassment, and profound regret. Denise, meanwhile, looked around the studio with an expression that suggested she still did not understand why everyone was so upset, why everyone was treating her like the villain. As Petula disappeared backstage, Kay Adams turned to the camera and said, "We are going to take a quick break, we will be right back." But before the cameras cut away, viewers at home could see Nadia Sawal turn to Denise and say, her voice barely controlled, "Do you have any idea what you just did? You just ran off one of the most respected artists in the world. She came here in good faith and you treated her like garbage." Denise shot back, "Oh please, she is being overdramatic. If she cannot handle a few tough questions, maybe she should not be doing interviews." Jane Moore slammed her hand on the desk. She said, "Those were not tough questions, Denise. Those were insults. You questioned her relevance, her talent, her right to even be making music. How is that not insulting?" Denise folded her arms and said, "I was just saying what people are thinking. If you all want to sit here and pretend like age does not matter in the music industry, fine, but do not get mad at me for being realistic." Kay Adams, who had been trying to stay calm, finally lost her patience. She said, "Denise, this is not about being realistic. This is about being respectful. Petula Clark is a living legend. She has sold millions of records, won awards, and inspired countless artists, and you treated her like she was some washed-up nobody who should just go away. That is not journalism, that is cruelty." Nadia nodded vigorously and said, "Exactly. You crossed a line, Denise. You embarrassed her, you embarrassed us, and you embarrassed this show. And for what? To prove some point that nobody even agrees with." Denise stood her ground. She said, "I do not care if you agree with me or not. I said what I said, and I stand by it. If Petula could not handle it, that is on her, not me." Jane shook her head in disgust and said, "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." The cameras finally cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Backstage, crew members were scrambling to figure out what to do next. Some were checking on Petula, making sure she was okay and apologizing profusely for what had happened. Others were debating whether they should even come back from the break or just end the show early. Producers were on their phones trying to figure out how to handle the fallout. Meanwhile, Petula Clark sat in her dressing room, still visibly shaken. A makeup artist handed her a tissue and she dabbed at her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup. She told the people around her, "I have been in this business for over 60 years. I have faced critics, difficult audiences, and all kinds of challenges, but I have never, ever been treated with such blatant disrespect on live television. I came here to share my music, to connect with people, and to talk about something I love, and instead I was made to feel like I do not belong, like I should just disappear because I'm not young anymore." Her voice cracked slightly as she continued, "I have always believed that art is timeless, that music, good music, transcends age and trends, but sitting out there, listening to her talk to me like I am some kind of relic, it hurt. It really hurt." One of the producers knocked gently on the door and stepped inside. He said, "Petula, I cannot apologize enough for what happened out there. Denise was completely out of line. If you want to come back out, we can do a proper interview with just Kay, Nadia, and Jane. We can cut Denise from the segment entirely." Petula shook her head softly. She said, "I appreciate the offer. I really do, but I think the moment has passed. I do not want to go back out there. I just want to go home." The producer nodded, understanding completely. He said, "Of course, we will get you a car right away, and again I am so sorry." Back on set, the atmosphere was tense. When the show returned from commercial, Kay Adams addressed the camera directly. She said, "We want to apologize to Petula Clark and to all of our viewers for what just happened. Petula is a true icon, and she deserves so much better than what she received here today. We deeply regret how this interview unfolded." Nadia Sawalha added, "Petula, if you are watching, we want you to know that we have nothing but admiration and respect for you. Your music has brought joy to millions of people, and it will continue to do so for generations to come." Jane Moore looked directly at the camera and said, "And we want to make it clear that the opinions expressed by one member of this panel do not reflect the views of the rest of us or the show as a whole." Denise sat there, arms still crossed, looking annoyed. She muttered something under her breath, but the microphones did not pick it up. Kay shot her a look that could have frozen fire but said nothing more. The rest of the show continued, but the energy was completely different. The lightness and fun that usually characterize Loose Women was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable heaviness that no one could shake. What had started as a simple interview about a new album had turned into a full-scale disaster. Petula Clark, a woman who had graced stages around the world, who had performed for royalty and fans alike, who had given her life to music, had been reduced to defending her very right to exist as an artist. And all because one host decided that her opinion was more important than basic human decency. The moment Petula walked off that set, something shifted. The audience had seen it, the other panelists had seen it, and viewers at home had definitely seen it. Denise Welch, in her attempt to be provocative and edgy, had crossed a line. She had shown the world that being controversial is not the same as being brave, that asking tough questions is not the same as being cruel, and that sometimes the person who thinks they are being honest is really just being mean. Petula Clark left that studio with her head held high. She did not yell, she did not make a scene, she simply refused to tolerate disrespect. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that dignity is not something you lose with age. It is something you carry with you, no matter what. She walked off that set not as a victim, but as a woman who knew her worth, and that, perhaps, was the most powerful statement of all. The clash on Loose Women that day was not just about one rude host and one offended guest. It was about how we treat people, especially those who have given us so much. It was about respecting the contributions of artists who have paved the way for everyone who came after them. And it was about understanding that age is not a weakness, experience is not something to be mocked, and legends, true legends, deserve to be treated as such. Denise Welch thought she was being honest, but what she was really being was unkind. And Petula Clark, in her refusal to accept that unkindness, showed the world what true strength looks like. She walked away because she knew she deserved better, and she was absolutely right.